Hello everyone, it's a beautiful night in Miami, and I'm just trying to keep positive vibes. We all have things going on in life that can sometimes stress us out, but what I'm learning is that it's always good to be mindful of why I'm stressed out or why you're stressed out, and to take a deep breath, take a pause, whatever you use, if it's a meditation, is it prayer, whatever, writing, whatever, and just be practical and be in the moment and realize that it's going to be okay. Always have a bag of coping mechanisms, things that are sane that will help you to get through the situation or thing that you are stressed about. And that's what I'm learning, and that's what I'm going through right now. But on that note, I'm going to continue my Black History spiel on Richard Allen and his contributions. So here it goes. So one thing that we have to keep in mind is that we're in a period now in the 1790s, a revolutionary period, but specifically we're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is highly progressive. There are thousands of free Black slaves, and most of us think that slavery ended with Abraham Lincoln and that was it. No, people were free from slavery before then in the North, specifically in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, just because there were many freed individuals, Black individuals from slavery in Philadelphia, and just because Philadelphia was a progressive place, didn't necessarily mean that Blacks were seen as 100% equal, okay? Let's go back to St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church. Remember, in the last video that I did, and probably if you do your own research, you'll find that Minister Richard Allen and Minister Absalom Jones were ministers at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, and they were there to cater to the Black congregation at that white church. As the Black congregation grew, the whites in that church built a gallery for the Blacks to keep them separated from them during worship. Not only did they do that, but they made it difficult for Blacks to worship freely how they wanted. For example, they didn't want the Blacks praying with them in the front. They didn't want them anywhere near them. Therefore, Minister Absalom Jones and Minister Richard Allen rounded up the Black congregation of the church, and they left. When they left the Black congregation, including, of course, Minister Richard Allen and Minister Absalom Jones, when they left, they created the Free African Society, also known as FAS, which you'll see online if you can look it up. Now, the question is, what did the FAS, or Free African Society, do? Before I get into that detail, I will tell you that before Greek organizations, before the organizations that Black people have now, it was one of the first of its kind for freed Black people, for Black people to take care of themselves in their own community. The Free African Society was the forerunner for African American churches. Now, you did have to meet some requirements if you wanted to be a member, okay? One of the requirements was to be free from slavery. You couldn't be a slave. You had to have your freedom, all right? You had to have gotten your freedom from slavery. You had to be sober. You couldn't commit adultery. Things of that nature. You had to have good character. You had to have class. You had to pay dues. And these were some of the qualifications to be in the organization, okay? And what did the organization do? What did the Free African Society do? Its purpose was to look out for its own kind, the Black people, okay? The Black people who were free. Because like I said, just because Blacks were free did not mean they were seen as equal to white people, okay? There were a lot of inadequacies, there was a lot of discrimination, racism, and the needs of Black people, as we see with St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, were not being met. The organization's foundation was basically networking within the black community. It looked out for black widows. It helped black people to have decent burials, okay? It helped black orphans. It helped the sick. It helped people get jobs. It helped people to get educated. These are the kind of things that it did. Anything within the black community that needed to be progressed, it was that foundation for progression in the black community. It's important to keep in mind that people who are, just getting free from slavery, they didn't really have anything to go to, right? There was nothing to go to. There was nowhere. They needed a starting point, and the Free African Society was definitely the starting point. Okay, so now we're going to make a little twist here. The yellow fever pandemic of 1793. All right. Something like COVID, it was a pandemic in 1793, and it was a rude awakening. With the yellow fever, people vomited up black stuff. It was black vomit that came out of their mouth. They had jaundice, meaning they were yellowy. It was a nasty disease. The causes of the disease are up for debate with different scholars and whatnot and doctors. Was it an insect? Or was it spoiled coffee beans? We don't know. But what I can tell you is this. I can tell you that the Free African Society played a major role in assisting with taking care of the sick during the yellow fever pandemic of 1793. Okay, so let's bring in this white man. This white man who was well-known physician, I guess you can call him, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Okay, Benjamin Rush was a progressive physician of his time. He was about finding newer methods of healing people as opposed to old, dark methods. Anyways, he was the leading. He was the headliner. He was the one who attempted to lead the people to get through and get healed from the yellow fever pandemic. Now, here's an issue. The issue with Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is that all of the bigwigs, all of the leaders, all of the first responders, everybody pretty much started leaving Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because they didn't want to catch yellow fever. All right? So there was really nobody to take care of the sick. Okay, I'm sorry to be jumping around a little bit, but I've got to mention this. Okay, so we know that Benjamin Rush was let's just call him the leader, in my opinion, of the yellow fever pandemic and trying to get everybody to feel better, right? All right, that's one part. Another thing to look at is, I'm kind of going back and forth, is the black body. So Benjamin Rush and others believed that black people were immune to the yellow fever pandemic. So that kind of belief system is one of the things that supported slavery, okay? Benjamin Rush was a progressive man. He was an abolitionist. He was against slavery. He really wanted progression. However, he did not see blacks as equal. Okay, that's very important to note. And again, he believed that the black body was immune to the yellow fever pandemic. It wasn't true though. Black people were getting sick from yellow fever. They were dying from yellow fever. But to put it back into perspective, in general, the population in Philadelphia, period, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people were just dropping like flies due to the yellow fever pandemic, and people were really sick. And that was the rude awakening, again, that caused bigwigs and first responders to leave. And again, like I said before, not to be redundant, there was really nobody to help clean up the mess and try to help the city get better. I mean, I guess there were possibly people to help. Like there were, I guess, doctors, I guess you would call them, people who practice medicine. But people at the time, in that time period, didn't really trust doctors because doctors were highly unethical. Highly, highly unethical. They would dig up corpses, they were overcharged. No one trusted doctors at this time, which is why, according to things I've researched, it was difficult to get people to have doctors take care of them. So my conclusion, based on the research, is that Benjamin Rush solicited Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and the Free African Society for Two main reasons. First, it was believed that blacks were immune to the yellow fever, and because there was no one really else trustworthy to take care of people during the pandemic. And when I say take care of people, the Free African Society was commissioned to take care of white people during this time. And it was, of course, there was some resistance about that, but it ended up happening. Now, here's the part that I think is cool, and to actually get to that, what I think is cool, let me explain this to you. So when the Free African Society was chosen to help deal with the situation, the yellow fever pandemic, of course, certain people within the society were trained. They were trained to do things that doctors, or I guess so-called doctors at the time, would do, right? They were trained by white people to bloodlet and purge. Bloodletting is when, I'm sure you know what this is. It's when it's an old antique way of healing, so-called healing people, where they would cut your arm or your leg or a part of your body, and they would let the blood flow out. And it was believed that by letting the blood come out, whatever disease that you had would somehow go away, okay? Give or take. And by purging, they would make people, I guess, release fluids, vomit, and things like that. Other methods were taught to them as well. I think this is interesting because, going to school, throughout life and watching movies and whatnot, when you think of people bloodletting somebody, you always have in your mind, or I always have in my mind, a white person doing it. I never think of a black person doing it. So this is why I think, I think it's really interesting that blacks are actually, they were trained to do these things for the white people to help them, to try to help them to get better. So yes, these were our first black doctors in the United States, I guess you can call them that. Interesting, isn't it? But yeah, they also, besides taking care of the sick, they also had to take care of the dead bodies as well, because many people died. So you had some people in the Free African Society taking care of the sick, and some people in the Free African Society taking care of the dead, by removing the bodies from the homes and putting them in coffins. So this book comes out, right? It comes out in 1793, a short account of the malignant fever by a man named Matthew Carey. It's basically an account on the happenings and how things went during the yellow fever pandemic, right? Sorry for my hat. Yellow fever pandemic, right? And one of the things that he does in this book is he criticizes the Free African Society. Now, keep in mind that the Free African Society did all of this work out of the kindness of their heart, okay? They put their lives on the line, and they did this because they wanted to help their white brethren. And those are the words that came out of either Mr. Richard Allen's mouth or Mr. Absalom Jones' mouth. They wanted to help their white brethren. They wanted to prove and show white people that they loved them. That's why they did this. So the Free African Society put their lives on the line to take care of these sick people. And so it's really sad that Mr. Carey, who author of this book that I just mentioned, he accused them in his book of stealing from the sick and the dead, and he accused them of profiting off of their work. Okay, the issue here is that Mr. Carey, well, not really the issue, but the issue here is that Mr. Carey was a renowned author. Everyone read his stuff. So if you're putting things out there about the Free African Society that's not true, how will that impact the society? Well, I'm here to tell you that Richard Allen and Absalom Jones did not allow that to get under the society's skin, okay? Richard Allen and Absalom Jones partook in another example of early black resistance. They created their own book to discredit what Mr. Matthew Carey wrote. The title of the book that was written by Minister Richard Allen and Minister Absalom Jones is called A Narrative of the Black Proceedings of the Black People During the Late Awful Calamity in Philadelphia in the year 1793, and a refutation of some censures thrown upon them in some late publications. So that's the entire title of the book that Richard Allen and Absalom Jones put out to defend the Free African Society. And in the book, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, it says here, they documented all of the courageous actions of the blacks who dedicated themselves to fighting the disease and included a meticulous accounting of payments and expenses, okay? It also looked at, or it called out the whites, including Mr. Carey himself, who turned their back on the city, okay, when the pandemic happened. All right? And the book puts emphasis on how Mr. Carey made more money from the creation of his books about this compared to the scraps that blacks made, the blacks of the Free African Society made for taking care of the sick and the dead. And just a side note, this is kind of random. They were saying how the blacks were immune to the yellow fever, but they weren't. And, blacks did die. Now, in Mr. Carey's book, he listed the names. He attempted to list the names over the span of all of his editions of his book, right? Because he had more than one edition, right? He kept editing it. And as a matter of fact, he actually edited his book to support what Richard Allen and Absalom Jones were saying, because of course he realized he was wrong. But again, I digress. Carey, he listed the names of people who died from the pandemic and whatnot, right? But the blacks are not included in that list. So just little things like that show you that yes, blacks did die from the yellow fever, but again, they weren't a priority enough to have their names listed in Carey's book. Unless there's some lists that I don't know about, or that someone knows about in this world that Absalom Jones, the Free African Society, or Richard Allen left behind somewhere. But according to my research, there's no accurate keeping of the names of the blacks who died during the pandemic. So yes, we know that Richard Allen was the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and we know that Absalom Jones was the first black priest in the Episcopal Church. Okay, and we know about the Free African Society, but they didn't jump right into the churches, right? They had the Free African Society first, and from there, the churches branched off. So I thought I'd make this video so we can put it into a little bit more perspective. We have, again, the leaving of St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, the Free African Society, and then the creation of, they went their separate ways, the AME Church and the Black Episcopal Church. So I hope that this video made sense. I hope that it was clear. If you have anything to add, put it in the comments. If you want to correct me, put it in the comments or let me know. This is pretty interesting to make. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too. Thanks for watching, and I'm sure you'll do more research. Thanks for letting me share.